Hello everyone, this is Sarthak Gandhi. I work as an SE2 Android developer in Dunzo, and also I am a part of Recro. Recro, which is a developer-focused organization where we are trying to connect good developers and their aspirations to the right opportunity by working with a lot of high-growth startups such as Dunzo, Swiggy, Kyofit, Udan, and a lot more similar startups. So today the topic that we are here for is the coroutines, and we'll be covering across the basics of the coroutines, how they work, how you can write some code around coroutines, and what are they used for, and what all things they will be replacing in your code. So today we have Ruparsh Kalia, and he's a software engineer at Mutual Mobile, and he has a total experience of 4 years in native Android development. Apart from that, he's also proficient in Flutter, Node, and a primarily understanding in iOS. In his free time, he writes articles on Medium and Mindocs, and he contributes to many open source projects on GitHub. So Ruparsh is passionate about optimal solutions and loves conquering challenges that are presented to him. I'll be giving the baton to Ruparsh so that he can introduce him once and start the session.
Thanks, Athak. Thank you for the nice introduction. Okay, so yeah, good evening, everyone, and thank you all for sparing your time for this wonderful evening session on Saturday. Uh, as I believe Sarthak has already briefed about me, I'd like to reintroduce myself. Right. So my name is Rupash Kalia. I'm a software engineer at Mutual Mobiles, and in total, I have an experience of 4 years of 4 years of experience in Android development itself. Prior to Mutual Mobiles, I was working in a Click Labs as a software engineer. And other than that, in the free times, I usually prefer writing blogs on the Mindocs or any Medium articles. And whenever I get time, I write articles, try to contribute on the open source projects on the GitHub. So yeah, that's just a small brief introduction about me. And yeah, today I'll be walking you through the world of coroutines. This topic is one of the most underrated topics, and it creates a lot of confusion among the developers and all the engineers who are working on it. So I'll try to share my knowledge and my experience working with the coroutines, and I'll try you to help understand and clear your doubts on the way. Right? Okay. Uh, Before we go into the coroutines, I would like to discuss about why exactly the need of coroutines came into existence. I'm assuming that all of you guys are from the Android developer itself and Android background itself. So it would be really easy to relate to the terminology and all the issues that we Android devs have to face to. Uh, yep. Okay. Okay. Now, generally, all the modern Android applications are data driven, right? This data could either be coming from the network or from the local data. Now, there are two ways, or I'll say paradigms, through which we can fetch the data. One would be the synchronous way, and the other would be the asynchronous. First, we'll take a look at the synchronous way and try to look into the issues with the synchronous way. Right? Okay. So here is an example of the synchronous way, a small program, piece of code that I've written. So here we have to fetch the data from the network source. This method called network request will fetch the data from the network and update the UI accordingly, right? But here is an issue. When we try to call this method network requests on the main thread itself, we will get an issue that it will block the main thread or skip frames are skipping, right? Uh, there is another issue with this approach. It's called network on the main thread exception. So let's suppose we somehow overcome these issues, right? We can overcome this issue with the approach called asynchronous programming. We'll just look into that paradigm. So yeah, here it is. Oh, sorry, this one. In this approach, we generally call the network extensive task on some different thread. Not network extensive, but I'll say any thread extensive task, be it reading in disk, be it input output operations, or be it any network extensive task. We'll generally try to prefer that doing that on the background thread. Okay, but the result that is delivered back to us, it's in the callback itself. The result that is delivered back to us, it is in callback. But what if we have a situation like this, right? We get a network callback. We using that result, we have to again call a separate API call and using and so on and so on. Well, this looks pretty neat, right? This situation is known as callback hell, and it is one of the ugliest situation a developer can find. It reduces code readability, as well as it doesn't look really nice, right? So, well, this uh, problem can be simplified, but first let's understand what callback hell is. Okay, a callback is a function that will be executed after another function has finished executing. And if there are a series of things to be done synchronously, then we will fall into a callback hell, right? And which can lead us to the ambiguity in understanding the code. Also, it depends on the number of steps and the logic we have in our applications. So, uh, as you saw in this previous example, we had many multiple API calls to be performed. So, and using the data which we have to use, this led to a I'll say stays of code, and it didn't look pretty nice, right? But this situation can be resolved using a couple of techniques. One of them, which is Rx Java or Rx Kotlin, right? This stack, Rx stack, makes the programming paradigm reactive, and those who are familiar with the reactive style of programming, they will really prefer that. But for those who are not familiar with this approach, they will have to learn another stack, right? And but there are some challenges to this, I'll say. uh, those challenges are like, for the guys who are not familiar with it, they'll have a slight learning curve. They will have to go through all the operators, they will have to learn about different schedulers, they'll have to learn about different uh, mechanisms, how those reactive thing and how those pieces of code are working. And also adding reactive to the project, it requires some structural changes. So once you do that, it's very difficult to go back to the different stack or use any another approach, right? So this is one of the another challenges with the Rx. And also, yeah, obviously, we are depending on a third party library. So if in the future we have to switch to another stack, or if we have to build our own solution for this as a uh, as a we have to build another solution to be as an alternative of this reactive thing, then it's quite a challenge, right? But this issue or this challenge was resolved by the Kotlin team. They provided us with the coroutines as a language feature in the Kotlin itself. So obviously we don't need to depend on any another library as such. Okay. And this coroutine, it combines the best of the asynchronous and the synchronous programming paradigm, right? This coroutines support was added to Kotlin in 1.1. Yeah, Kotlin 1.1 coroutines were added. So they have been solving the issues for us, and we don't need to go any another library or as such. Okay. Okay. Personally, the reason that I love coroutines is readability. It expresses the asynchronous code as sequential code, which is easy to read and understand. But under the hood, the callbacks are implemented by the coroutines. So it's not that the callbacks are totally eliminated, but yeah, that is taken up by the compiler itself. So if any of you guys are familiar with Kotlin, or if any of you guys have looked into the Java bytecodes for the coroutines as such, you'll see that there are callbacks are implemented under the hood. Okay. Uh, but yeah, let's discuss that later on. Let's first understand what Kotlin is. Okay, so Kotlin is nothing but a lightweighted thread. They provide us an easy way to do synchronous and asynchronous programming. This is the official documentation of the coroutine. I'm gonna just read that out for you guys. So one can think of a coroutine as a lightweight thread. Like threads, coroutine can run in parallel, wait for each other, and communicate. Right. So basically, according to me, coroutines are nothing but simple thread management framework. Right. They don't create new threads for you. They just manage threads for you so that you don't have to handle threads on your own. This is a small example piece of code of the coroutine, how the earlier example that we did see earlier with synchronous and asynchronous programming paradigm, how it will look like with the coroutine. So if you can see here, uh, this network request function is running on dispatches, is using something called dispatches.io. We'll see later what dispatches.io is, but here you might be seeing we have a keyword called suspend, right? And it is returning a data as the result type, which is being used as to show on the UI, right? So this programming paradigm, if you see observably, this looks something similar to the synchronous programming, but in actual, it is a mixture of both asynchronous and synchronous programming paradigm. Okay. So yeah, as I was mentioning you about this dispatches.io and this with context, all the blocking code which generally blocks the thread or the network calls or the disk or operations, they are generally written this in the coroutine block of with context, right? So that it doesn't block the main thread or the current thread that the code is executing. Okay, so let's look behind what suspend is doing behind the scenes, right? uh, as I was mentioning you about the key term, keyword called suspend, right? Let's see what suspend is and how it actually works. So suspend is simply a function that can be paused and resumed at a later stage. They can execute a long running operation and wait for it, wait for wait for the code to be completed without blocking the main thread. Suspending functions are something similar to the regular functions, but they are not. They're similar to the regular functions without the keyword suspend, right? So it can take a parameter and have a return type. However, this suspend function must always be invoked by another suspend function, or they should be within a coroutine. So I mentioned to you guys early that under the hood coroutines are simply rewriting callbacks for us. Let's take a look and how those things are. So when we write this function background thread with argument param and with the return time integer, what we'll do is under the hood it will add another parameter called of the type continuation, and it will with the return type as void. So under the hood it will look something similar to this, right? Where callback is a callback function which will return with the result or with the exception. The continuation here is an interface which contains this following method: resume and resume with exception. Okay, this resume returns the type value which can be of any type. It is generic, and if any exception occurs, this resume with exception function will be called, which will throw us the exception, right? Now, generally, the coroutine comprises of these four components. Let's take a basic look at the basic anatomy of a coroutine, how those things are under the hood. So the basic terminology, the basic components that comprises of a coroutine, these are dispatchers, coroutine context, job, and coroutine scope. Let's understand them one by one. First of all, dispatchers. dispatches, they determine the thread that a coroutine will use for the execution. Okay, so basically, on which thread you want the following the piece of code to be run, that is determined by the dispatcher. If you want the code to be run on the background thread, or if you want the code to be run on the main thread, that is all taken care of by the dispatchers. Dispatchers are of three types: dispatchers IO, dispatchers main, and dispatchers default. We'll take a look at them at the later stage, what these mean, how they can be used. Moving on, this coroutine context. Okay, so basically, when we run a coroutine, context is required. Okay, this context is provided by the coroutine context library, and it determines what context it will be used. The next in line is a job. So job is nothing much but a simple coroutine task. What task needs to be executed, that is just a job. Okay, and the last but not the least, that is coroutine scope. So this coroutine scope, that determines what scope the job will run it. Okay, generally, in Android development, we have what do you say, we have scopes for classes, right? And if any particular object exceeds the scope of a class, we get the memory leak issue. But this coroutine scope handles that perfectly. Like, if handled properly, there are no chances of memory leaks. So we'll take a look at these components in detail. Now let's see how coroutines works under the hood. Right. But before that, I will like to explain about coroutine scope and how other components are related and how they work. Okay, so this is a small example which will explain the coroutine scope and how we can utilize it to the fullest. Okay, uh, a coroutine scope keep tracks of any coroutine launched. Here in this example, if you see this function load example, we have scopes dot launch, right? So launch is a extension function of a coroutine scope. So we have two functions, launch as well as async. Okay, so if you launch any coroutine using the functions async or using this function launch, that is keep tracked of by the coroutines using this scope. So once the scope of the class, here in example class, so once this scope of the example class gets over, so anything run in this scope, anything running in this scope.launch will be cancelled automatically. You can manually cancel the scope using this cancel function. So and yeah, we can cancel this job manually using this, calling this function called cancel, and anything which is running, it will be automatically cancelled. So no chances of memory leaks here as well. Right. Moving on, talking about the Android. So Android team has provided us with these two coroutine scopes in the KTX library. One is view model scope and the other is lifecycle scope. View model scope, if you guys are aware of the view model, the MVVM architecture that we generally prefer doing, all the data operations or all the manipulations that is done on the, that is preferable to be done on the view model, right? So for that we have this view model scope. Since view models have their life cycle on their own, so this view model scope handles that perfectly. So if the view model scope gets over, anything which is launched in using this view model scope will be automatically cancelled. So we don't need to handle that explicitly. Any API call that is done on this scope, on this view model scope, or any disk operation performed will be handled automatically, and it will be cancelled. Let's if the activity gets destroyed, or if a fragment gets destroyed due to screen rotation or due to the user interaction on the back press or something like that, so we don't need to handle that explicitly. View model scope will handle that. right? The next in line is life cycle scope. Life cycle scope is for the life cycle owners. So if you have to perform any uh, operation in the activity itself, let's say you have to create a file, or you have to uh, run any task which it can be performed which requires context, or which can be performed on the view model or in the repository itself, but it can only be performed in the activity. For that, we have this something called life cycle scope. So this cycle scope adheres to the life cycle of the activity, to the life cycle of the activity, right? So if this example activity gets destroyed, or it gets paused, or whatever that life cycle may be, this life cycle scope will adhere to its life cycle. Okay. Okay. In the early example, if you see this, we have this something called launch, right? So as I mentioned earlier, the launch is an extension function of coroutine scope. Uh, let's take a look into coroutine scope and break that down and understand the mechanisms behind it. So if you see, this launch function is accepting a parameter context which is of the type coroutine context, right? And the default value of that is empty coroutine context, right? So this launch function is accepting coroutine context. As I mentioned you earlier, the coroutine context is one of the components of the coroutine. So let's try to understand what coroutine context in actual is, right? It's simply a index set of elements that define the behavior of a coroutine, right? So what context that needs to the coroutine needs to adhere to, or how that needs to be executed, that is handled by the coroutine context, right? uh, Coroutine context has four elements which we can combine and create use them in a coroutine. uh, Coroutine context has four elements. These are coroutine dispatcher, which further has three types: dispatchers.io, dispatchers.default, and dispatchers.main. uh, Okay, this dispatchers.io, this is a optimized for input output operations, disk, and network operations. So anything that requires input output, or any disk, or anything, that is generally preferable to be handled on the background thread. So this background thread, that is, it can be created using this dispatchers.io, right? Anything which is CPU intensive task, be it any calculation, or be any loop, or anything which is a quite intensive, that is generally handled by the dispatchers.default. That is preferable to be run on the dispatchers.default, and it actually induces a thread pool internally. So how many threads are required for that particular operation, that is handled by this dispatches.default. We don't need to handle the thread management by ourselves, right? Other than that, the last dispatches.main, everything which is non-blocking, or which needs to be performed on the UI, that is handled by the dispatches.main, right? We'll take a look how we can pass these dispatches when we try creating a coroutine scope. So we'll take a look about that. And the next in line of the coroutine context is coroutine exception handler. So it is an optional handler which allows us to handle any uncaught exceptions. Generally, as a practice, we try using try catch, but this coroutines using this coroutine, that can be handled. All the exceptions can be handled without actually using trycat, which is a neat way of writing the code. It's much readable, uh, and it's quite handy, right? Next in line is coroutine name. Okay, so when creating a name, when creating a coroutine, we can pass the name, which is quite helpful while debugging. Uh, and the last element is job. So this job controls the life cycle of a coroutine. So anything which is running inside a coroutine is a job basically, right? Now we can combine these multiple contexts as we saw in the previous slide. When passing calling this launch function, we need to pass the context, and we just saw that coroutine context can be of various types. It can be of dispatcher, it can be exception handler, or it can be a job, or it can be basically or name anything, right? So when creating a coroutine scope, we can combine this coroutine context, various coroutine contexts, using the plus operator, right? So here is a small example. Here I've created a scope where am I passing a job, dispatcher, basically IO dispatcher, and also I am passing a exception handler, right? One interesting thing that needs to be taken care, that needs to be focused upon is the coroutine context that will be created will be having the context of the elements on the right side of the plus operator, and it will override those who are on the left side of the operator. So if you see in this example, uh, the right side of this example, that is exception handler. So this scope will adhere to the context of the exception handler, and it will override the dispatches.io, right? uh, One interesting thing, when working inside a scope and using a context internally, we can switch a context for some another operation. Small, let's say this is the example, right? Here we are using, let's say we are working on the dispatches.io here. And so if you see this example, load example function, when we launch this function, in the comments I've written that using dispatchers.io here. So the first line, if you try to debug, or if you try to print there, you will find that the scope, or the dispatcher that is currently being used there is IO, right? But if you try using this function with context and you pass what dispatcher you want to use, you can basically switch it. So once that scope, or once that lambda gets over, the next line, it will be again running on the dispatches.io. So it's basic, it's quite an easy way to switch threads. The Probably the example that we can use is basically, let's suppose we have to perform some uh, what do you say, some small disk operation. We can use dispatches.io, and after using that result, we have to perform something CPU intensive task, like we have to filter out a list, or we have to combine multiple lists, or something like that, right? So that can be performed on the dispatches.default. So it's quite easy way of switching the dispatches or switching the threads as such, right? uh, Here are some of the use cases uh, that of a coroutine, uh, like parallel calls, serial calls, which is, as I mentioned in the previous slides, that let's suppose if we have to perform a serial call, right? If we are using the asynchronous programming paradigm, we can run into a callback hell. But using coroutines, it is quite easy to perform. We'll see how we can do that. And yeah, handling exceptions, the second point. Uh, we can handle any exceptions without using the need of try catch, and it's an easy and quite readable way, and it's quite optimized also as well, right? And the last, if we have to manage threads of our own, then coroutines is quite helpful in way. uh, Yeah. Other than that, as you guys might be aware, that async task library has been deprecated by the Android team. So all the operations that we generally prefer doing there, like do in background or post update or or anything that is quite really helpful using this coroutine task. Sorry, this coroutines. Okay. Uh, Before we jump into the practical part or into the code part, uh, is there anything that needs to be re-explained in simple terms? Now, moving on to the practical part, let's see how we can use coroutines and how we can create how we can use serial network calls, or how we can use parallel network calls easily and uh, efficiently, right? So I've prepared a small code sample for this thing. uh, for using the coroutines, we are required basically these two dependencies: the coroutines core and coroutines android. These are the latest versions, 1.41.1 of the coroutines that are currently stable. If you wish to require the view model scope function or the lifecycle scope function, which I mentioned earlier, that were provided by the Android team, those are available as a part of the KTX library. So those are available used in this dependency, lifecycle runtime KTX, and that is for basically view model scope and other KTX functions. And the sorry, I that so the view model scope function is available in this lifecycle view model KTX, and the lifecycle scope function and other KTX functions are available in this dependency, lifecycle runtime KTX. Okay, so first of all, let's see how we can for this example, particular example, I am using the MVVM architecture. So I've already prepared and some of the same other items. So first, let's take a look what the this is a simple activity that I've created. I'm not doing anything, just a simple API call and adding the list to the recycler view. This is a simple function, as you all might be aware of the syntax and those things. So in the view model itself, in the init block, when this view model gets initialized, I am calling this function called fetch users, and here I am using this view model scope dot launch. Yeah, so I am using the scope of the view model. So once this activity, let's say the API call is in progress and someone kills that activity, generally, if we didn't adhere, if we talk about a couple of years back, uh, when we were following MVP or when we were following MVC in general, uh, we were not explicitly canceling the API requests. So that usually led to the crashes, right? Because no view or no owner was present to catch that particular network request, right? But now using this view model scope thing, view model scope function, any API call which is called inside the view model scope, and if its result gets delivered after the activity has been cancelled, that will not lead to any crashes. That will be simply be neglected, right? So here in this function, we are calling the view model scope dot launch. Launch here being the extension function of the coroutine scope, and I am running this operation on the background thread. This is a IO operation, so I am running it on the IO thread dispatches.io. If I don't pass anything here, dispatches dot, if I simply do this, then by default it will be running on the dispatches dot default. But I want my API call to be performed on the IO thread, so that's why I've passed the dispatches.io, right? This is a loading. So once this function gets called, I post to the UI. Then now start the loading thing. That is for this posting. Users here is a live data. So that's why I am using a post value and those things. So here I'm simply calling this API in a try catch block. I'm not explaining, showing coroutine exception handler here that show later on. So once this API gets, this is a simple API call, right? So if you see here, I have this in this function, I have marked this function as a suspend. So I am telling the compiler that this function is a suspending function. So until and unless the result of this function API helper.getUsers gets delivered, the code will not execute to the next line. The next line won't be executed until the next line of that particular scope, right? If you see this gutter icon, this tells you that this particular line is suspending. So a nice way of telling the user that in this particular line you are using a suspend function, right? So once the results get delivered, only then this next line would be executed, and the result would be posted to the UI. This is a simple API call, which we could have done without using the coroutine, but for the sake of the example, I preferred this. Let's say if we have to perform a series API call, right? We have to call multiple APIs, one after another, right? So generally the example would be, let's suppose using one API call, we have to use that result and pass the result in the next API call, right? So that would be a series API call example. So in this example, I am calling this API.helper.getUsers. So only after the result of this API gets delivered, the next API call would be executed. It might look like this is a parallel API call, but in actual, this is a series API call. So since this is a suspending function here, all the following lines written within this particular scope will not be executed until and unless the suspend function has fulfilled its promise, right? So this is one API call, this is another, and here we are combining the results of the multiple API calls and posting that to the UI. This is all users from API, right? So users from this API, users from this API, we merge them, we add them to a single list, and then we post it to the UI. The next example that I would like to share about this parallel API call. Sometimes we are required to perform multiple API calls in the parallel, and let's suppose we have a situation like we call one API call to fetch the list of the users who like playing football and fetch a list of users who like to play cricket, right? And we have to combine the data of the both the lists and then show it on the UI, something like that, right? So that can be performed easily using these coroutines. We have something called async here. I'll explain it to you what async and what is the difference between launch, just a few minutes. So async, right? So we call this function as a, and inside the async block, and we call the another API inside another async block, and then we use this keyword, use this function await, right? So what basically is happening here is we are so this async, this is basically a promise that the following, the result of this user would be delivered later. So what it does is, if the compiler sees this async task, is it simply fires away the uh, piece of code written inside this block, and it moves to the next block, right? And here we are using await. So here we are awaiting the result of this particular block. So once the result of both is gets delivered on this await, we now have the results, and we add that to our list and then simply post it. So if we have to do this approach the traditional way, then we might have required uh, some checks or some loops or something like that, the traditional approach. But using this coroutines, everything looks pretty neat and clean, I'll say. If you try to decompile it and look under the hood, you might see the same traditional approach that we do, like callbacks, loops, but it is simple. But using coroutines, everything has become pretty neat and clean, right? These are two examples of series and parallel calls. I also mentioned about okay. Before that, I'll also mention about room, how we can do room. This is something similar to what we were doing in the network operations call. Okay, yeah, here I missed the launch IO. Here I am running all the operations here on the default dispatches dot default, right? So what we are doing is, we are fetching the list of users from the DB. We are looping and we are inserting them one by one. So this is one example of how we can perform the DB operations using coroutines. The other thing that, yeah, exception handler. I also mentioned that we have something called exception handler, right? So if you see the difference between the single network call and this thing, right? So here we are using a try catch. So if any exception occurs on this coroutine, in this coroutine scope, that would be handled under this try catch block, right? Uh, but we have something called coroutine exception handler. So if any exception occurs, that would be handled by this coroutine exception handler, and that is delivered to us in this lambda with this exception parameter. One thing that needs to be taken care of, basically the examples that I'm showing to you, they are just basic stuff. They are not adhering covering all the cases or all the situations that you might face in the future. One example could be, let's suppose, uh, if you have another, let's suppose if you have uh, sub coroutine scope inside this parent coroutine scope, and exception occurs there, how will that be handled? So that part is, I'm not covering as of now. That is some advanced stuff and out of scope of the current talk, so I'm not covering those part, right? So I'm just showing to you the basic examples here. And yeah, this is like simple. Yep, the one thing that I mentioned earlier, the difference between async and the launch function. Yeah. So basically, the launch function, it returns a job. So and it does not carry any value, right? So if you see in this example, if you try to decompile it, so it is returning a job, right? So anything running inside coroutine scope, this is basically a job, right? So this launch function, it returns a job, and it doesn't it doesn't have any resulting value. But on the other hand, this async returns a deferred. Basically, this is a promise. So if you see this, this async, this is a promise that the following the result of this code will be delivered later, right? So here we get this result using this await function. So we are awaiting for the result of this particular piece of code. Yeah. The last thing, some of the advanced concepts that we are not covering as a part of this session are supervisor job, child jobs, what are continuations, what particular tasks need to be performed to cancel a job, and how to handle the child jobs in an exception handler, and all those stuff we are not covering as of now. And yeah, with that I would like to end my time, and if you guys have any questions you can drop them in the questions box itself.
So as of now, I think we have two questions. So first one is, can I use a custom thread pool instead of a defined dispatchers?
Yes, we can use a custom thread pool. Yeah.
So we can use them in the, how can we define our thread pool on which we want to run the coroutine?
uh, so sorry, at this moment I'm not aware how we can use that, but yeah, I'll definitely read about that, but yeah, we can do that.
Okay, so the next question is, we defined a coroutine scope inside a view model. Uh, why two different scopes? Can you explain use of scope in detail?
I'm not sure what this question refers to.
So I think Karandeep, I think you like, so we have to extend the view model with the coroutine scope class, and then we have to implement this coroutine, like this view model is responsible for that scope. So I think we don't have to define it two times. We just have to define it once. And the scope means it's bound, the coroutine, that the job we are handling inside the launch function is bound to that coroutine, not the coroutine, that coroutine scope, which is currently the view model. So as long as that view model is alive, that job will run. Once the view model is cleared off and it is GC'd, the job will stop, and it will uh, prevent any crashes. That So we have crashes. We had crashes in MVP, right, where we we had callbacks from the thread. Like after the thread has done its job, it will post the result to the main thread and it will crash. So to prevent that, we bind our coroutine to a life cycle, and that is what the response, the responsibility of a scope is. So I hope that is answered. All right. And next one is, async is same as JavaScript, right?
Something similar, yeah. What we have in JavaScript, yeah.
Yeah, like promises and
Promises and yeah.
futures and promises. So earlier, I think in the first version of, if someone has used coroutines during the very first versions or the beta versions, there were actually promises and futures that we could use back then, but they have since made it easier so that uh,
Yeah, now we don't need to handle.
yeah, we don't need to have that future
Yeah.
promises. The next question is, when to use async and launch.
And launch. Yeah. So if basically you are, if you want a job to be, if you don't have any simple yeah, parallel task as such, or if you don't have any result to be performed, to be used at a later stage, you can simply use the launch function. That this is a one-off task. You simply launch the coroutine and you perform the task, and that's there, right? But if you want to use the result, and in the example that I've mentioned, if you have parallel API calls, then that you need to perform the async.
So the next is, the two asyncs will be executed in parallel and flow will continue on block at await.
The two asyncs will execute in parallel and flow will continue, or block at await. It will be blocked at await. Yeah.
So the thing is, once you call the await function, it will launch whatever is inside the async parallelly, and then it will move on to the next one. Once you get the result of both the asyncs back the await
Different
function
location.
returns it, and then you will be able to move on to the next line.
Next job. Yeah.
Using launch can also be used to execute for parallel job. I mean, you can launch two
Mhm.
different coroutines, uh,
In,
like two different coroutines. You can launch one
launch
coroutine.
yeah, but you won't be able to utilize the result there.
Yeah, the results will be in different scopes. So that's the problem there. So that's why we have this async part where you can like put that piece of code into a parallel thread, like where those are done parallelly. Actually, it is like not done parallelly. Like if you go internally, it is like the same IO thread, but it awaits for it, and like whenever the thread is free, it performs the other task, and vice versa. It's a queue actually, as we all know that a thread is a queue of tasks. But yeah, like it will feel like it is done in parallel, like both of them will be dispatched one after the another, and it won't be waiting the whole time. Whenever the thread is free, it will start working on the next.
Mm.
So guys, we'll like some feedback from you guys, and I'm sharing the feedback link, uh, which
Yeah.
which I'll be posting here. We also have our YouTube channel where you can find our previous talks. So I posted that also. I'll post it once again. Our YouTube channel
Just
on
one
the
more.
chat. And I also where you can see this task in the later stage, and other previous talks also you can find. And also I'm sending you the uh, a meetup link where you can join the meetup, and where we post every like updates regarding all the talks. And also we have a WhatsApp Android group. If you want to join there, you will get the latest updates on the new talks that are coming up. And our speaker's LinkedIn profile and my LinkedIn profile are also attached. And please do share the feedback, and if you had any problems, and or any, even if you want to even if you want to appreciate the effort done by the team, you can provide it in the feedback form. And so I think we have got some more questions.
Yeah. What if
Okay,
we cancel?
what if we cancel any child job?
Yeah, we can cancel the job at any time. I mentioned showed that we have a cancel function, right? So using that, we can cancel any job explicitly at any particular moment. Uh,
Yeah, so the return of the launch function, the return type of a launch function is a job which you can save it in a variable, and then you can say you are in view model, and you launch one coroutine, you want to cancel it. So in I would suggest that in the on cleared method of the view model, where the view model gets destroyed, you can simply call the job dot cancel, and the job will be cancelled. So what it does, it's from the parent, it will start canceling all the jobs down to the very bottom of the
button.
tree. So there is it is kind of a tree where in the parent job you have multiple branches where you have more jobs, and like that you can. So if you cancel the one particular job which is a child job, it will just cancel that, and all its I would say all its
Subchilds.
child, yeah, all the
Yeah.
subchilds that are had, it will cancel all of them.
Yeah.
It won't affect the parent job.
Parent job. Yeah.
And if it throws any exception, it will be caught by the parent's exception
Exception
handler.
handler. Right.
Supervisor scope versus regular scope.
This okay, yeah, this the supervisor scope is basically the scope of the parent of the parent job that it is being executed.
So, like, by regular scope, do you mean the global scope dot launch? Abadut? So I would suggest, like, to you most of the time, try to use the life cycle scope, and because it will manage all the cancellation of the jobs when the life cycle gets over of a component, such as a view model or a activity. So global scope launch you can use in classes where you need something done in the application context,
Hmm.
but I would not suggest that. Like everything should be started from a component,
Oh,
and that component should be the owner of that. I would say, but if you are working across multiple, if we are doing the same job in IO dispatcher and so many, if we cancel any job in IO,
then
no, why would so the job
it
uh, that will
job
be
and
cancelled is the that job only. So if you say I have three services that are running in parallel and I run a job in all three of them, if I cancel one of them, only that part of code won't be executed.
get it right.
Any more questions? All right, I think we have answered all of them, and yeah, that should be it. All right. Thank you guys for joining this session and spending your time on a busy Saturday. Not so much busy, I would say, but yeah, taking time out of your the free time which you have and learning something. So it was a pleasure serving you all guys, and I hope we can bring more sessions like this to you, and so that we all can learn uh, from these kind of open source. And I would also suggest you guys also to come up with something which you know, and uh, contact us if you want to host a session. That would be really appreciated. That and yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. And
All right.
Rupash, yeah, you want to say add something at the end?
Yep. I would like to thank you everyone for sparing your time and giving me the opportunity to present my thoughts and present my knowledge with you guys. So, yep. Thank you all, and I really appreciate you guys.
Yeah. So the recorded session of this session will be available on Thursday on our YouTube channel. So I've already shared the YouTube channel. I'll share it once more so that you can take a look at the other talks that we had in the past. So yeah, right. I think yeah, we should be done. Thanks, guys. Have a nice day. Thanks, Rupash.
Thank you, Sathak.
All right.